We've got to move this industry forward. We have to break down the silos between developers and designers and contractors. Like, we're literally designing and building and shaping communities and the planet.
I'm just going to stand. This is chaos. This is
You got it.
You're actually in the middle. So thanks again, Nguyen with Hensel, Phelps, and we'll just do some quick introductions. I think in the journey with Hensel Phelps in the last handful of years, I think our partnership with startups has been there for a long time. It's been in our DNA. I think I've been empowered in the last year really to start to put more focus on it, right? And so in this panel discussion, we're going to get some insights in terms of what that relationship looks like from a GC's perspective, and obviously really relevant to our startups as well, and what they're seeing and their insights and how they're able to gain some successes or some areas of lessons learned that this group could benefit from as well. So with that, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Anderson, Swinerton, Director of Innovation, and I'm just really glad that the support system is starting to build up around startups. The work that we've done with robotics and in the past, the growth in VDC and all those things might have a chance of really changing this industry. And it's really fun to be a part of making those things work from a business process point of view and from a contract point of view. And so the willingness to work with us and the opportunity to work with us is I think, invaluable to everybody. So.
Fantastic. Roy?
Hi, I'm Roy from BotBuilt, and I'm very excited to be here. I've known Ty now for a little over a year, and every conversation we have is always intriguing. So happy to be in this platform and make our conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm NK from Constructn, and we automate construction monitoring. So I've been again working with Ty closely for 1 year now, and I just came to the US about 4 months back. I didn't understand being in India, it would be easy to work with large general contractors basically, because identifying, talking to the users and discovering problem statements was very difficult standing from India. But over here, interacting with Ty and how Hensel Phelps has been totally open and supportive about it has helped us accelerate our journey.
Brent?
I'm Brent, and unlike Sean, this is my best side, so you're welcome. You guys can see lots of this. So we build homes with robots. What that means is we basically leverage AI and computer vision systems with a robotic system that's proprietary to our own to help, as a startup, large companies build out many, many different units through mass customization systems that we've developed. So this is an apropos topic for us today.
Fantastic. And so this panel I can't take the credit for this. It was marketing behind some of this in terms of the session title, which is PB&J, which I think is relevant, right? It's I think the relationship between PB&J, if you're not familiar, you want to guess, it's peanut butter and jelly, right? And how that works together. But it's a very symbiotic relationship, in my opinion, and in my experience in the last decade and working with startups. There's so much value, I think, if you do it right. And I don't know what's right or wrong. That's why I think we're going to hope to get to some of the insights today in this panel. So with that, I think as a general contractor, you're probably wondering why we're partnering with startups and the strategy behind that. So we're going to give some quick context to that. Aaron, do you want to start with that concept?
Yeah, actually, I'll start with why not.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
One of the first things that we do when we're addressing new technology. So what we've had to do in our business is really draw a line, right? So one of the first things I do is give out a security questionnaire. And most immature products fail right away, right? I say the word SOC 2 compliant or the phrase SOC 2 compliant, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should talk to somebody else. But that process is is really valuable to everybody, right? Because the thing is, like, even as a business, when we just rely on compliance, we miss out on the whys and we miss the gaps and stuff, right? So the reality is that what is your technology doing? How is it interacting with security or with our systems? And getting into the weeds with that helps us to understand our business, right? And that awareness and that process of learning makes everybody better, right? And initially, it's what informs the standards in the first place, but things change, and that's that's an example of how this process works for both of us.
No, that's fantastic. And Aaron's correct. I think if I ever start a conversation with a startup and start referencing SOC 2 and FedRAMP, it's pretty much done at that point, right? And it's not an easy journey, I think, for any startup to start to consider that, especially if you're heading towards enterprise. It's something that you should be considering, but right away when you're trying to find your bearings, it's tough. I think as Hensel, Phelps, I think I heard something recently that resonated with me where someone said to me, the tools of the industry reflect the industry. And obviously, as everyone is aware, construction is very fragmented, right? The complexities that the GC has today, and it starts with our owners, right, having their own tech stack. And within that, the GCs are bringing their own tech stack. I feel sorry for our trade partners, right? Because they're having to work with all the GCs, and then on top of that, the complexities of the owners as well. And so today, really for Hensel Phelps, I think the largest reason why is so we can get and be strategic about how we absorb technologies, and a lot of it's investment into our people. I think our people are wanting better ways to do all things, right? Different scopes that they're doing on a day-to-day. There's definitely room for improvement. So we're navigating that and wanting to make sure that we're listening to our employees and trying to make their lives easier and our processes more efficient. So that's really a lot of it that we work with startups, and I love watching startups, right? It's kind of we'll touch on some of that today. It's dangerous too in that relationship, and there's some complexities with, I call it scope creep. Any startup that starts with a GC, it's you bring in a product line, and then next thing the GC has you doing is trying to improve in all facets of what they need. So you're bringing in maybe a tool focused on BIM, and then next thing you know, you're creating a QA QC checklist, right? So is that within your roadmap? And that's real, right? I think it will resonate in this group. So I think with some of that journey, Roy, you want to start in terms of kind of some of your success stories or some areas that you feel that you've struggled on with GCs?
Definitely. I think some of the benefits large GCs and larger companies get through working with startups is agility. And I think we were talking about it before is one of the successes we've had with a large, it's a construction manager, a construction management company that manage a lot of government projects, education, State Department of Educations. And actually KP made this introduction, said, hey, speak to him. I spoke to the person at the company. He said, we looked into Procore, we looked into all these products, and just nothing fits our pricing model. We got 6,000 small projects a year. Nothing really fits our pricing model. I said, give me 1 week, I'm gonna have something for you. A week later, I called him, I set you up a pricing model, you're gonna get unlimited projects, unlimited users, don't even think about it, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, you're gonna have it. I said, great, we're gonna work with it, and we're onboarding the company, multiple state departments now, so I think just the ability to provide them with a pricing model that works for them is a benefit that they now have. So it's one of the things I think large companies get working with startups.
Well, and the quick decision making that you could just make that decision.
Yeah.
Correct, that too.
Whereas, I mean, anyone here on a committee at your company right now? No? Yeah, there's one. There's one honest person in the whole freaking room, right there. Yeah, it's a different thing when he can just say, this is what we're going to do, go.
Yeah, and I think that agility is, I think, Aaron, you can resonate as well. I think for a GC and a larger GC, it's important. I think as we get bigger, we lose that ability to be agile, and I think we do a ton internally, try to develop our own internal products, but in many ways we are not software developers, right? We know construction, we're decent at, providing some tools, but that agility to work with startups is refreshing because they can ebb and flow and adjust. But then, what I said before, it's a dangerous path because again, you got to make sure that you're staying within your roadmap and not providing such a custom tool, right? So, NK, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. For us, basically, it was the core technology was there. We knew that this is a serious problem. Everyone is looking to solve it. in different mechanisms, but it's largely unsolved even today. So the core tech was there, which got us the foot in the door, right? I mean, people got excited, construction companies got excited, you get to have a conversation with them. But then what was important for us was both formulating the product roadmap as well as the anti-product roadmap. There were things that we were thinking of building in our heads, which might be useful, but having this immense amount of discovery calls, discovery sessions with different stakeholders. Again, you need to have as much diverse as possible. We got to do that, and we could actually adapt to that actually. So I would say formulating the product roadmap as well as the anti-product roadmap, having multiple conversations and getting that convergence is super important for us.
No, and it's a great answer. It's hard, right? I think especially in your product, you're trying to, like with every GC today, and I'm sure Aaron can resonate, it's, you know, our tech stack is bloated. You know, I think with every job that we start, we have multiple solutions today, and so how do we kind of navigate through that, right? And I think you've got some approaches to how you guys do that. Right?
Well, and so many of us are even fragmented internally.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's one of the biggest challenges about creating enterprise architecture, right? Is for us, what our tech stack looks like is we're a project-based business, and if a client wants something, I've got to find a way to get it for them. And if a project manager needs a feature in the ERP, like I have to find a way to provide all those pieces for all these people, and a lot of that for us is saying no for the sake of like keeping the number of software pieces, the number of licenses, like there's efficiency in all that. But I think us even internally recognizing that we need to standardize and scale the way that we, the way that we roll those project teams out is important, but it really helps to understand our business. What's interesting is when I sit down to talk with somebody like NK, it's like I realize that I don't even know, and that some of our project teams don't even know what it is that they need, and that's a really powerful opportunity, right? And so I think our strategy with tech stacks and it is really to be efficient, but instead of just feed the growth, feed the scale mindset, right? Feed the idea that we should be, trying to leverage the scale that we have to operate those efficiencies more. I mean, those projects better.
And you may think, I think for a GC, like the easy button, right? Why don't just use one of the incumbents, right? That has all those solutions in play. And I think once you get through marketing, you realize that they don't have it figured out as well. I mean, they may, market a certain way and throw a certain term in front of every product, but the reality is when you start to really dive into the weeds, it doesn't work together either. So it's not like that's easy. But I think, Brent, we talked a little bit earlier about what is some of your kind of experiences with engaging with a GC or a
for me,
strategic
it's
partner?
just, I see us as an easy button, but it's a two-way street, right? So we've got the agility as a smaller company. I've got the ability to work. I've got a team of very smart, and I'm not allowed to call them nerds anymore, very smart individuals who do amazing things with computer technology, and I have the ability just to turn them on a project and go. And that agility is something that a lot of big bureaucracies just simply don't have. The flip side of that is the big bureaucracies have stability. They have market name recognition. They have go-to-market paths that are already established where I don't have those inroads. So for us, a lot of the initial conversations and now the contracts that we have are with companies that can easily bring us into marketplaces that we want to be in, while at the same time they don't have to make the investment in changing a culture around building a certain type of technology. I was remarking earlier, you were in the IDF, right? I was in the US Army, and I remember one of my first assignments was working with the IDF on some technologies that they had developed. And I went over there with this guy, General H.R. McMaster, is my first real boss in the Army, right? And we were over there looking at stuff, and H.R. McMaster's a big tanker. Like look up the Battle of 73 Easting. This dude was a boss, right? And he's very, very smart. He has his PhD, wrote his dissertation just flipping off all of his bosses. Very fun time. But we went to the Israeli forces and we were establishing some communications on some tank technology they had. They had taken our stuff and made it so much better. They were lighter, they were agile, they had the ability to just innovate, and then we said, how much do you want for it, right? Like we were the big check that got to come in the room and say, we'll buy it, because this is amazing and you've done it better. Now, HR had some other choice words about how little we had done innovating, that's a problem. When I look at big, large-scale companies, there are benefits to bureaucracy. There are benefits to large, stable organizations. But the detriment there is something that startups don't have to fight with. And we can get guidance on both ends. We can have an easy button on both ends. And it just makes it so much nicer for a large company to come to us and be like, I need robotic technology. I could take 20 years changing a culture within my R&D, or I can just buy your license. Cool, move.
There's also benefits of competition, right? So what I get to do is I get to co-optate, right? Like I get to build my own competitive advantage without having to own the technology,
Yes.
right? And because it costs a lot to develop it, and it takes a lot, not just my user stories, but your user stories and all of those things to put it together. I can't imagine that I would be any good at developing these tools in-house and then rolling up a business development team and spinning that off so that we could actually, get the benefit of scale in the product.
That's a great point. Part of the job of a startup is obviously to find a market, right? We have to find a market that actually matters, that is scalable, and will make billions of dollars. Because that's, especially when we take VC money. Like KP didn't write me a check to over time it'd be great if you were up 2 to 3%, right? No. And while he did, I love his revenue spiel, but at the end of the day, in 10 years, this better be 200x, or else what was the point of rocket fuel? You need to go.
Yeah.
So for us, we study the market in depth, we know it in depth, and we can go to a bigger company and just say, hey, we've got this dialed in. You don't need to shift everything over. Let us pay the patent attorneys and let them have great Christmases. But you get to understand where that technology can go and market it for us in a way that's meaningful.
No, those are great points, and so how do you navigate through all the, obviously, as you engage with different GCs and strategic partners, and they're giving you a ton of good information, right? We'll call that. How do you navigate that, NK, in terms of your product roadmap and making sure that you're actually listening to your strategic partners, but you're not going to create this custom tool specific just for one client?
Right. In our case, it has been like that, right? There's a lot of feedback that you get, a lot of advice, a lot of different pointers on what you need to build. But we follow the 80-20 rule. If we find 80% consistent advice or, consistent requirements across the GCs that we talk, that is something we understand we need to prioritize. We roll that out and again, startups being agile, we can roll that out quite quickly. We again get a feedback loop on that and then take it to the next level. So the next 20% we say it's still in our roadmap. Actually it is, we put it in the backlog and we put it in the roadmap, but we prioritize it at the right moment. So that has been something that has worked for us so far.
That's fantastic. And I know, Roy, you have a approach to this as well. You want to share a little bit how you do it?
Yeah, so definitely working with enterprise large clients, you walk a thin line as a startup. You need it for healthy cash flow, but then you also don't want to get sucked into this build me a product just for me. And kind of approach that we took with one of the clients is, we have our product roadmap, and what we did was, without getting too technical about it, we kind of branched off the main source code, and everything that we build on the main source code, on our main product, we feed into the branched off code of the enterprise client. And when they request anything, we kind of just build on their branch, and branding, colors, logos, everything they want, remove features, add features, doesn't affect the main source. So that way, we're really able to focus on our product roadmap without really affecting the enterprise client and vice versa.
So. Yes. There's no questions yet, KP?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, no.
So I follow the startups, right?
Yeah.
When a big logo approaches me, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
And then they ask for the free pilot. And I'm like, the answer's no. The answer's no, right? The answer's no. Because there's not mutual commitment.
Yeah.
What kind of tips do you have to the founders? I'm just absolute about it, just tell them no, right? And move on to somebody that actually cares, because it's about commitment. What tips do you have? I mean, because everybody wants the big logos on their slides. They get super excited, and then they find out oh, you're not going to pay me. How do I do all this R&D effort with you and not get compensated for it? For the hope and dream of being an enterprise customer.
No, that's a great question, KP, and I'm sure you can answer as well. I'll start with, sometimes the commitment is beyond just the, cutting a check at that early stage, and especially with us, it's, we don't have an R&D facility, right? Our incubators are our projects and our people and our owners, right? And so, in my perspective, the commitment with Hensel Phelps is really giving that startup that exposure, right? They're giving that amazing feedback from the project teams. Like with NK and I, we've worked for a while now, and I don't think there's been a dollar exchange yet. It's really, there's value on both sides in him learning to grow his products. But I'm not going to speak for NK, but I think for us, it's really that commitment level. It's really about the sweat equity that we put into any startup, right? It's really giving them the feedback that they need, the exposure that they need to different areas of our business, and then our owners, right? I think for us, that's been a really good equation for success. And then, where it starts to make sense, and I'm not sure if Green Badger's in the room, but really, we went through that process with Green Badger, and then, we actually went into an enterprise agreement with them and started to grow them, and now we want to use them in every project around the country and start to work on what this ESG platform needs to look like in our strategy. And so that partnership is different in different phases of where these startups are, right? And so you want to touch on that a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so
the bill's in the mail.
Yeah. Right. So the first conversation after coming to the US I had with Thai and Hensel Phelps team was, would you be interested to be a customer advisory board, right? So we decided to have about 3 to 4 large general contractors at maximum as the core design partners as such. So here we are doing discovery as well as, these will help us take the product to the next level. We understood that, just pushing a pilot and if the users back off from it, it will be, again, the door's closed, right? You don't get a chance to open it. But understanding it clearly and then starting a pilot, hopefully now is the time. And I'm just kidding, but I think we can get it started in that sense actually, because we understand what the requirements are across different users.
Yeah. And I think it's patience as well. I think through your discovery process, I think many startups want that enterprise agreement right away. For us, we're not ready yet. We're hoping to get you on one pilot, right? And within that, sometimes it's a needle in the haystack. It's really on the cadence of our jobs and our owners. It's not sometimes like I can put you on a job. I want to make sure there's the right resources and people to support it, and then set you up in an environment that succeeds. If I put you on a job and give you no support, you're going to fail. And a lot of it resonates because with our people, they're very particular, and if they see a technology fail in one district, then it's going to resonate across the other districts, right? And so you've got your one shot that it's just, you got paid, but then there's no sustainability in that, right? So, and we also want to be thoughtful. I think if we're going to put you in a large project and there's going to be 1,000 users, we're not going to nickel and dime you, but we're definitely going to give you, find some common ground to make payment as well. So from a Swinerton perspective, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the project-based cash flows is the biggest problem. Yeah. And one of the things that we've done with the innovation department is set us up so that at least we have the incentives aligned internally somewhere within the company. So we'll pay for a lot of the pilot process. But I mean, I've got folks that I've worked with for quite a few years in some robotics solutions, and we're trying to help push that forward. Then we make a project agreement, bring the thing out, and it ends up costing the team more to complete the project than it would have if we would have just left it on the sidelines. And that's the opposite of incentivizing. That's the opposite of creating ownership. That's basically killing that. Like at that point, that team is ready to say it doesn't work, right? And I have to come in and communicate, well, there's this capabilities gap, and start talking, all of these things. And if we're paying for pilots too early, we should just be on the front end of that getting equity, right? And I think that's where the balance is at. And so that's where like meeting with teams, but at the same time, there are definitely situations where we have things that I know can create value for a team. And if that team isn't paying for that out of their general conditions on the project, or paying for it to do something, or what even works better is when a client has asked for something, right? Or we try to sell it in pre-construction, right? We create this opportunity to pilot this thing that we know is going to work in pre-construction, and we get the client to buy into it also. And then our teams have, because there's money in general conditions. Like, our teams go out and completely outfit brand new trailers for every project, right? Like, there's these things that we do that aren't really, they're like all the dirty little secrets about where money gets wasted. But the reality is that it's not just aligning the incentives on our team by having them pay for it, it's aligning the expectations and the results of the thing for the client, for the contractor, and for the company. So there's a lot of preparation that has to go into making a pilot successful, but absolutely, paying for it helps. Paying for it can also be the death knell,
If I could, because you hit on two things that are important, because we have a lot of startups in the room today, we have a lot of smart investor people in the room today, and a lot of people that are in construction. So two powerful questions a startup can ask, right? How do you make money, and how do you lose money? Ask your potential clients this, and they will give you the book. Before we implemented one panel system, we had understood what our market is, where they lose money, where they make money, and how we integrate into that. Because if you don't understand that culture from the jump, your pilot is just going to be something that's either a culture killer or a people killer or both.
Oh, that's a great point. And I know there's other contractors in the room. I think if you want to maybe state a little bit about your perspective and your approach to startups, feel free to do so. Yeah.
I think what's critical is that in our this industry, right? It's very stubborn. So you get people being able to something else, is that right? It's real. So I think that in terms of media and entity, I think it's you're doing it in terms of wanting to take ownership, right? So I think one thing that I like to see more sort of space, right, is you build an advisory board and you build experts in the and then as you are building a product prior to release, you have some idea that certain strategic partners, right, will help you build the product. And then at release, there's always that I'm not worried about it. Release has been my experience kind of learning to have that in the world, right? So I think so people won't pay for pilots. It just depends. I think they will. It depends on how involved they get in and build it.
Yeah. Great point. Anyone else from a contractor perspective?
I would just add, trade partner level down, you use the same emergency.
Yeah.
Us as electrical contractors, we're doing a lot of the same things, but we're doing it separate from each other.
Yes.
And that is the big main point. The ECC is trade partners. We've got to have ECC to work with us on a day-to-day basis. Just doing our A project, we'll learn a little bit, and we're making anything valuable to any of us at scale around the industry. It has to be some pretty genuine partnerships, not just with startups, but with the contractor base and architect engineers and developers. Great delivery systems. Wonderful for a reason.
Just get on BIM, it solves everything.
Yeah.
None of this would be a problem.
Yeah.
No, it brings, I heard the industry, right? We say the industry, the construction industry, it's 700 industries. Like, everyone here has a different viewpoint on it.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it starts there. Right? I think too often we rely on technology that's going to solve a problem, but a lot of, majority of the time, for me at least, it comes back to people and process, and to your point, that alignment. A decade ago, I think when I got into this role, it was hard just because I think, technology was our IP, right? That's how it differentiated us from our competitors. But I think today what I'm seeing in industry, I get together with my counterparts at least once a month, and we talk shop and we talk industry, and it's about sharing, right? It's about, we know it's not sustainable. We know, I think and I've talked to owners where I think with every project that they start, they've got GCs bringing this bag of tools, right? I've got this product that's going to be that much better, and it's like they're so frustrated as well. They want us to align on this, what this technology playbook looks like, right? And then create more consensus and alignment to what you said there, and working with not just GCs, but our trade partners, right, or our owners, or A&Es, right, that's I think important. Yes, sir?
And just a quick comment from the software side. So we talk about this idea of 10x engineers in software companies all the time, and many of us would know what that's about. But we introduced a few years ago the idea of a 10x customer. We started to talk about it internally. And what does it mean to have and be a 10x customer? And there are two things that we sorted out in the end. One was dependence. So that a big customer, I mean, I like having big customers to be partnered with, like you guys. But like trying something out, providing feedback, I've never found that to be that valuable. Counting on us, that's valuable. So I want a big customer that if we blow it, they're screwed. You know, they're in big trouble because then they lean all the way into the relationship, and they're, you know, with their full self collaborating every single day. So that was number one. And then the second thing about a 10x customer is willingness to talk to other customers. And for us, those two levers took someone from, you know, being an average customer to being worth 10 customers, even if they paid very little. And so you know, given that we had that little framework we talked about for years, I thought I'd mention it.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that resonates with me, I think, in terms of my, experience with startups. I had one recently that, well, last decade I've been working with a startup, and, you know, I took them to many of our big projects, took them to Israel with us and in Ireland, and they were on the ropes for a while, ran on the runway, and realized this cannot fail. I put so much sweat equity into this team and this partnership, got them on two of my largest jobs in the country. I can't see that acquisition with, you know, we won't name names, but, and so within that, I think as Hensel Phelps, we, you know, were very, I think the leadership was so progressive in bridging this startup for 3 months with salary, right, until they could actually get acquired. And for us, it resonates what you said there, is, you know, there's some strong ties there, and it's, you know, they will forever go to bat for us, and, you know, and vice versa. It's just, you build more than just kind of like that commodity relationship. It's kind of like that partnership that, for me, that's the value.
Yeah, I found that having a customer with financial upside related to your business is interesting. But more interesting than that is if they have, you know, on their core business, tremendous downside if you fail.
Yeah.
Right? So, because they care about their core business infinitely
Oh, yeah.
more than they do about some sidecar investment into us. And so that's what I see. You know, having a little bit of upside, that's fine. But having someone that existentially gives,
Yeah.
But
gives a shit about us, I care about that.
Yeah. But the thing is, your product and your solution has to create that dependency, right? So we've had folks that come to us, and it's really cool. It has a lot of future potential upside, but we're talking about like robotics and hardware that is really like 10 years down the road. But they don't want to take any of the risk, and really aren't situated to take any of the risk in this scenario, right? They're basically like trying to get us to indemnify them for everything and do all of that in the contract, right? So that's part of, like, I think, you know, you take a $5 billion enterprise, and it's impossible for them to lean on a small startup. And the only way that they can lean on a small startup is from a solution point of view. Like, if you can really solve this problem, then we can lean. But if what you're offering is like a small solution to like a small productivity problem, it's just not going to happen.
I thought KP's point earlier this morning was on the nose on this, and then he said, you know, an MVP, you're not going to depend on an MVP, because MVP is, you know, aspirational usually. That's why I think aligning the sort of horizon on the capital and the growth rate early on, and making sure that it's actually a little bit, I need some clever acronym for this, but like worthy of being depended on by a big company, or else their business is going to have serious trouble. That's an interesting place.
And it's interesting what you're saying. Like, so whenever I introduce Rowie to people, I'm like, Rowie is my Procore killer. We're going to put them out of business.
Yeah.
That's my one message. People go, awesome. But my entire business depends on Procore. How do I like forklift them out? I'm like, well, you can either spend all your energy beating your head up against the wall trying to work with them, or shift that energy to helping him put them out of business, because he's got the right attitude about really helping the industry move forward. And it's like, how do you want to spend your time beating ahead against an incumbent that's not going to talk to you about your features and your needs and want a percentage of your project. I mean, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you, and I think Sean's point is like, that is core, but it's scary, right? It's scary. And then the Autodesk and Procore show up and scare you. Right?
Well, and that's where their equity stack also matters though too, and their motivations behind their situation too, right? Because there have been companies that we've relied on to import a lot of energy into, and then they get sucked up and platformed, and the feature and the direction gets diluted and goes away. And so that's a risk that we have to assess. And so sometimes there are people that we trust in a good situation, but we know that they have behind them a bunch of backing that isn't necessarily going to push them, that's just pushing them toward like the maximizing exit and not the long-term viability of the product. And that is a big risk.
Yeah. And it's go ahead.
One of the benefits of the Startups app is sometimes when these startups are kind of now in the last seed stage and they've had some massive equity raise, they depending on who did it, they are forced to price themselves way outside of what other people are willing to pay.
Yeah.
And so there's this benefit for you, right? Like you can price yourself in a way that's not necessarily priced based off of the revenue per year that a multi-billion-dollar company's going to do, which is very hard to forecast.
Yeah.
And I think to your point on the 10X, I think what I've seen is if you can focus on, you give a long-term vision, you can focus on high frequency, high pain initially, even if it's not the sexiest thing for you, that gets them in, right? And then you build, you add on.
Yeah, I think there is also a dynamic. Like startups go talk and they go read all the books and they listen to the podcast and they hear MRR and ARR and CAC and LTV. Our industry is project-based. Generally, those metrics are nonsense, and most of the startups that purport MRR and ARR in our space are practically lying.
How dare you insult SaaS metrics?
So they conform to this like metrics that the generalist VCs say, and they raise a bunch of money, and it's actually not true. They did one project with, the logos are fantastic, right? Hensel, Phelps, blah, blah, they have all the logos. And it's like, well, how much recurring revenue? Oh, we did one project, right? Right. And I think that conformity to try to conform to mainstream SaaS metrics is a problem.
Even harder.
Yeah.
Analyzing an acquisition, right? That's
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yep.
Behind me.
Yeah.
So I'll be speaking later, but I run an innovation program at a large corporate in Hexagon.
Yeah.
So I work with a bunch of startups.
Yeah.
And we run into two problems. One is time scale, because when we talk to a startup, can you guys fix this by next quarter? And you're bored. That's one part of it. The other one is internal buy-in of the organizations.
Yes.
Because it's always like, oh, how many of you guys? There's 3 of you? Let me just hire 3 guys and do the same thing next year. So it's this issue of, and it's hard sometimes to shift the thinking from quarter results to strategic thinking and to say, okay, it will take 5, 10 years or more to try to build this business out and have some patience to get there. But it's usually much cheaper than trying to start our own projects, which usually are huge and sometimes are not as good and or have divergent priorities and everything else. So it's a lot of culture building in large corporates to try to get to this place where this becomes a much more functional relationship.
Yeah.
So just as a
No, I absolutely agree.
Well, and if you think scope creep working with a startup happens, try it internally.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Change management matters.
That's right. And I want to go back to KP's point, obviously talking about the incumbents, right? I don't think there's a GC or a contractor or even a trade partner in this room that doesn't want to peel back some of those layers with some of these incumbents today. I think we've become so entrenched, and as a culture, we have tools today that are better than what they have, but because everyone speaks that same language in the industry, you can't replace it. And everyone is so frustrated seeing this 30 to 40% markup every 3 years in their EBA. It's like, and it's not just the GCs, it's our owners, it's our A&E partners, right? It's our trade partners. So how do we break out of that cycle, right? And so many of us are hopeful that, yes, there's going to be a Rowie out there, or an NK, right, or even a Brent that kind of can change some of that cultural thinking and actually get us to adjust that way. So.
But there's a leadership dynamic there too, right? Like these guys have this amazing software package and they can just come in and do it.
Yeah.
But if I'm an older CEO of an established company, I might not see the value in that if one of my own team comes to me and says, I want to establish and stand this up, right?
Sure.
But if I've got a known product that's already working, I can just go and flip that switch and move into them, you know, with relatively little overhead. But there has to be the buy-in from that leadership team to see that through, and the bloat is real, right? Any internal committee becomes this gigantic expose into growth that is exponential in the wrong area, in operations costs, not in profit.
All kinds of questions, yes, sir.
Something I think we keep touching on is this element of testing a product or trialing a product, piloting, whatever it may be. I'm curious if there's some general kind of tipping point that occurs that you guys look for as it relates to, okay, this product is ready to now pilot.
I'm going to let Aaron start that one.
Well, I mean, there's a tipping point about when something is ready for scale. And that's when everybody starts asking for it, right? That pull is the thing that I'm constantly trying to create. So even in a pilot, I'm trying to open this thing up to pull, right? So if it's something I believe in and I know will work for our process and works for our business model, then it's like I'm exposing, like the pilot is more of a marketing effort, right? But for the piloting itself, it's about the use case, right? And that's what, like, if there's already a clear use case, piloting is really just about making sure that the back-end stuff like the integrations and the API documentation is correct, and that like the other and security and the other groups that we're working with, right? But when the use case isn't clearly defined, like, and the technology doesn't really fit the use case, that's when you just have to wait till there's an alignment, and then you know that it's ready to pilot.
Yeah.
Right.
I think to add to that, I think in the culture that I've experienced in the last 10 years with Hensel Phelps, it's no longer me polling. I'm getting pushed, right? I mean, it resonates with everybody from an FE all the way up to leadership. They want to improve on things, and for us, it's groundswell, right? It's really getting a project here, 3 projects in that district, and all of a sudden I got 4 districts, and then 6. So within that, that's how we start to kind of resonate it. And so from a corporate or leadership side, it's management from top down, navigating that, right? And as I keep trying to figure out how this technology ebbs and flows within the company, that's typically how it's when the groundswell gets to that point where I'm like, it just makes sense to go and enterprise and commit, for the next 3 to 8 years, right? So, yes, sir.
Question for Ty and Aaron. How do you guys think about startups which compete with, let's say, the red ocean, right, the Autodesk, Procore of the world, but then there are other startups who are competing in completely blue ocean markets. So something like robotics applied to construction. Is there different strategies? What advice would you have?
Yeah, and I think we gotta wrap it up. Do we have time to answer this question? Or okay, yeah, no, Aaron, you want to start with that one? Yeah.
So if you're competing in a red ocean scenario, the assumption is that you are competing against an established use case and that the technology is like well developed, right? And so in that situation, it's like it's all the things. It's evaluating the business process, like versus what we're doing, like really digging into that like specific efficiency returns and specific differences in workflows. But if it's like blue sky or blue ocean, it's really about like imagination, right? It's about, can we imagine aligning our strategy around it? Can we be creative about how we're going to shift our business model and the opportunities in that? And those are 2 different teams and 2 different levels of capability, I think, too.
Great answer. I think with that, we're good.
Stage,
So, thank you.